What's happening, everybody? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast here on Wednesday, May 5th, I guess. My name is Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Appreciate you joining me. You guys are the absolute best. I appreciate all the new follows and the comments and the likes. You guys have been absolutely great. So really appreciate that. If you've not subscribed already, please make sure to do so. It's so easy, just one click, and it helps me out greatly. But let's jump in right away. Enough about that stuff. Today, my main topic is not going to be anything Aaron Rodgers related. We seem no closer in resolving that big issue, so let's put that to the side for now. And in the meantime, let's keep our friends close and our enemies closer, and let's take a look at the NFC North. And one thing, if you guys follow me regularly, either you have already noticed or you'll begin to notice, I always like to kind of keep tabs on what's going on in the NFC North. Obviously, if you're a Packer fan, which I'm assuming you are since you're watching this, it's always great to kind of keep tabs on what everyone else in the division is doing. Are they on the rise? Or are they on the decline? And I think it's really important that we kind of take a look at what I thought was a really important draft in the NFC North, especially where some of these teams were selecting, and obviously with some of the choices in particular that were made within the NFC North. I don't want to be too hyperbolic here, but when you have something going on like the Packers have with Aaron Rodgers after 3 decades of going from Favre to Rodgers, and again, this could all be a moot point, and maybe the stuff with Rodgers gets, turned around and worked out, right? But if it doesn't, and all of a sudden Rodgers is retired or on another team, and you have to kind of start something from scratch, I think there's always like this idea of the San Francisco 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys were such great teams for so long, and then no more Steve Young, no more Joe Montana, etc. They had a couple nice years, Jeff Garcia, things like that, but then all of a sudden things fell off a cliff for a while. Same thing with the Dallas Cowboys, right? Everything's running swimmingly with Troy Aikman. They're this, NFC dynasty for a while, win a couple Super Bowls at least. I can't remember exactly how many they won, but and then all of a sudden Troy Aikman's gone, and you go through Quincy Carter. You have a nice run with Tony Romo, but it doesn't amount to anything. There's a million other quarterbacks within that realm, but ultimately, you have this lull of winning playoff games and certainly being into Super Bowl contention again. And at some point, that's going to happen with Green Bay, right? Maybe Jordan Love is the next decade-long amazing quarterback, but at some point, it's probably going to happen where Green Bay has that dip in performance and dip in play, and things turn on their head, and all of a sudden another team takes hold of the NFC North. And I am in no way, shape, or form saying that that's what just happened this weekend. Way too early to say anything like that. I'm not jumping to that conclusion. But if 5 years from now, all of a sudden Green Bay's, struggling to not be a, third or fourth finisher in the division, and Chicago or one of these teams that had a really good draft over the weekend in the North is, I think we may be able to look back at this draft and say that's where that transition of power really took place. And now, of course, if Aaron Rodgers leaves and you have to, end up with trying to bail water out of a sinking ship to some extent, yeah, you're probably going to be behind the 8 ball a little bit. But I think what the NFC North did was really interesting in this draft. So let's go into that right away. I'm going to start with the Minnesota Vikings, who, of the 3 teams in the North, probably was the draft that it was good. I don't think it was great, but they did definitely do some really nice things. And I think that started off in the first round, not only getting Christian Darrisaw, but trading back, picking up picks and getting Christian Darrisaw. I thought if they would have selected Darrisaw where they were, I thought that would have been a home run pick for them based on the, kind of the structure of their offensive line. But the fact that they were able to move back, pick up that additional draft capital, and still get Christian Darrisaw, I thought was brilliant on the Minnesota Vikings part. Maybe a little risky, but it definitely paid off. I believe Christian Darrisaw will be one of the best left tackles they've had probably since Brian McKinney. Now, they may need to work some things out. They've got Brian McNeil. They got Ezra Cleveland. My guess is Darrisaw plays left tackle now and for the foreseeable future. O'Neal continues to play right tackle, and Ezra Cleveland stays inside. They'll have to kind of work that out a little bit, but that'd be my guess. I think he's going to be their best left tackle since Brian McKinney was playing in his prime. I think this was a fantastic pick for the Vikings. Really good run blocker, really good pass protector. That has been a major weak point for them. Just their offensive line in general. Really since probably Kirk Cousins kind of came on board. So a really big pick for them there. Then they come back at the beginning of the 3rd round, pick 66 overall, and they select Kellen Mond. Now, I personally am not a fan of Kellen Mond. I don't think he probably amounts to much. Reminded me a little bit of Josh Dobbs, the quarterback from Tennessee, who hasn't done much in the league. A cup of coffee with Pittsburgh. I don't even know where he is right now. He may still be there. I have to look into it further. Not up to date with my Josh Dobbs stats and facts, but he kind of reminded me of that type of player. Great athleticism, live arm, didn't know how to exactly quarterback. Those are things you can teach, but it doesn't often happen that way. But that being said, we've seen overall in some of these drafts where all these top quarterbacks go, and then it's the Russell Wilson in round 3, even Kirk Cousins later in that draft. It's the Dak Prescott in round 4. It's more still the exception to the rule, but we've seen it happen enough times now where things like this can happen. And I think this is just literally a lottery pick selection by the Vikings. Worst case scenario, they get a solid backup with some developmental, potential. Best case scenario, he turns out great, and they have a heir apparent to Kirk Cousins sometime in the next couple seasons. What happens with that, we'll see. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of Kellen Mond. As a Packer fan, I would not be concerned about the presence of Kellen Mond in the division, but it's a wild card at that quarterback position for Minnesota. I thought Minnesota rounded themselves out with a solid but unspectacular draft from there. I think Chaz Surratt will fit very, very well in that Mike Zimmer defense. I think he's a solid linebacker. And I think, he could be one of those players that's a pain in the ass for Green Bay. We'll see what happens there. I think Wyatt Davis has the ability to start for them immediately at guard, and I thought that was a really sound selection at pick 86. I'm actually surprised they picked Chaz Surratt at 78, Wyatt Davis at 86. I'm a little surprised they didn't go Davis first and Surratt. I thought Davis would have been the pick there, but if deciding between the two, but they get two good players. Going back to Surratt just for a second, I thought there were a few other players on the board at that time, whether it be a Diami Brown, Tommy Tremble, the tight end out of Notre Dame, Amari Rogers, who the Packers selected. I thought there were some better selections there that they could have taken. But again, I think Chaz Surratt's a good player. They come back with a couple edge rushers, one at pick 90 and 134 was the other one, Patrick Jones and Janarius Robinson. Again, they're just looking to hit on one of those. If they hit on one of those as a solid, productive NFL pass rusher, they will be very happy. Patrick Jones at pick 90, I personally would have went with Ronnie Perkins. I generally don't like the guys that don't test well athletically at all, but I really liked Ronnie Perkins on tape. I probably would have leaned him, and I think he would have been a really sound selection in that Mike Zimmer defense, but they obviously like Patrick Jones a little bit more. Hopefully that works out in Green Bay's favor. They took a really interesting player in Kene Nwangwu. I'm not going to pronounce that name correctly, but just dynamic running back who is more straight line speed than, kind of jump cut and, add agility and those sort of things. But was a really interesting prospect. People didn't expect him to go that early, but I think he could be a really nice pick for them. And then they took two of my favorite players, kind of late round players in this draft. Cameron Bynum, defensive back. They listed him as a defensive back, which means, and I know a lot of people thought that he may need to transition to safety. I thought he was one of, if not the most technically sound corners in this draft. The issue is he just doesn't have the athleticism. If Minnesota uses him correctly, I think they could find a serious gem at cornerback. If it doesn't work out and they have to move him to safety, I don't think he has a ton of upside there, but his technique at corner might just be good enough to make him a good player in the NFL. We'll kind of have to wait and see on that one. And then Amir Smith-Marset, he went at pick 157, which I think is about right. I know a lot of people really liked him, thought maybe he would go a little bit earlier. I think right around 157 is right, but has some return ability, has some run after the catch ability. He's one of those players, you go and watch him on all 22 and there's nothing there. Like you're not concerned about him. You're not paying him any special attention. He just looks blah, to be honest. You go and watch his highlight tape and you're like, holy crap, this guy can literally play and has a ton of upside. So it's one of those players where you have to kind of weigh out, if you're just watching the down by down, doesn't seem to be anything spectacular about him, but then you go and put all the big plays together and you're like, okay, this dude can ball. And so I think that was another really smart pick. They rounded out their draft with Zach Davidson and Jalen Twyman, but really here, Christian Darrisaw and addressing the offensive line with both Darrisaw and Wyatt Davis, I thought was big. They get a lottery ticket at quarterback in Kellen Mond, and then some nice players, Cameron Bynum, and then Amir Smith-Marset in the later rounds. I thought this was a solid, if not spectacular draft by Minnesota, and definitely the Kellen Mond pick will be one to kind of keep monitoring as you're the Packers. You obviously don't want them to hit on a lottery ticket quarterback on late day 2 of the draft. So that will be worth monitoring. Let's move to the Detroit Lions. I thought they had a Detroit Lions draft with what they're trying to accomplish. They want to be a team that's tough in the trenches. Well, they go Penei Sewell, a potentially 15-year-long left tackle in the NFL, has every right to be one of the perennial Pro Bowl, All-Pro, left tackles in this league. It sounds like, that they may have some flexibility to move him to left tackle or right tackle. We'll see what they end up doing there, but I thought this was a fantastic pick for them. And then they go back-to-back defensive tackles in Levi and Wuzurike, as well as Aleem McNeil. With McNeil's pick, they had both Milton Williams and Osa Odigizua on the clock or available at that time. I probably would have leaned in that direction a little bit over Aleem McNeil, but McNeil and Wuzurike pair together perfectly well at the defensive line position. McNeil's going to be your big body space eater, going to be the run stuffer of the two, and on Wuzurike, going to be the little bit undersized 3 technique who's going to shoot gaps, get upfield, and cause havoc in the backfield. You really hope that those two guys don't both hit and they end up with a run stuffer and a pass rusher. I'm not exactly comparing them to the Williams brothers here, but Aleem McNeil is your Pat Williams in this scenario. Levi and Wuzurike is your Kevin Williams. I don't think they're either going to get to that level, but that's the type of defensive tackle position that Detroit's trying to put together here. Then they come back and get one of my favorite players in the draft, in Afatu Melifonwu. I had a first-round grade on him, not that that matters in any way, shape, or form, but really love the player. They get him in the 3rd round, which I thought was a steal. And then I know a lot of people loved Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's a good, solid overall receiver. Pick 112 is right around what I would have expected out of him, but a player that just does everything right. And you kind of go back to some of these receivers that Detroit has had, whether it's been a Marvin Jones, whether it's been a Kenny Galladay. It's been kind of these players that, haven't exactly been spectacular in college, but come to Detroit, play really well. I think Quintez Cephas has the ability to be that type of player for Detroit as well. So they have kind of a knack for finding those maybe unspectacular wide receivers that end up very, very productive for them. And then they came back with Jamar Jefferson in the 7th round, who I think is a really, has a potential to be a productive running back. They don't exactly have any room in their running back room right now. DeAndre Swift's certainly going to lead that charge, but I think Jamar Jefferson has the potential to make a roster, which at the end of the 7th round is all you're looking for. Like this draft, they really address the trenches. I think the big question mark here for Detroit, pick 7, they take Penei Sewell. They have the ability to select Justin Fields. They have the ability to select Mac Jones. They go with Penei Sewell. They don't go quarterback. We know they just, made the transaction for Jared Goff. Personally, I probably would have taken a run at a quarterback here if I were them. They didn't. They addressed the trenches instead. We'll see how that works out, but no qualms about this draft for Detroit. I thought this was a very strong draft. Ultimately, if it's Jared Goff at quarterback, it's tough to be overly concerned, unless, of course, Tim Boyle gets in. Then look the hell out. Chicago Bears up next, and I did not think that Chicago had a chance, picking in the 20s, that they were going to be able to move up in this draft and get one of the top quarterbacks. I thought there was a chance that all of those quarterbacks were gone in the top 6, 7, 8 picks. And of course, it doesn't happen that way. Justin Fields falls to pick 11. The Bears move up. They give up future first-round picks again. I am shocked that Ryan Pace has another opportunity to select a quarterback. But he is, and he got his guy. And this is an opportunity for a really big turnaround for the Chicago Bears. They've got a solid, not great overall team. I think that, that defense is starting to age a little bit. Their offensive line still isn't great. Allen Robinson, we'll see how long he stays a Bear. Really like the Darnell Mooney selection. David Montgomery's really coming into his own. They have some work to do on the overall team, but they just got themselves a potential franchise quarterback for arguably the first time in their franchise. Now, long way to go. A lot of really smart and really good teams passed on Justin Fields and went with other players. So there's not a resounding, this is the guy, this is going to be a top quarterback. The biggest downside for Justin Fields, his processing, was one of the slowest quarterbacks to get rid of the football in all of college football a season ago. He has to speed up his mental processing if he wants to survive in the NFL and wants to, really work out well in Matt Nagy's offense. But I think Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy hit a home run in the fact that I think this buys them time. I do think they'll start Andy Dalton. I think they learned their lesson a little bit with Mitch Trubisky. I think they will take a very slow process developing and making sure that, Justin Fields is ready to go. If you're Green Bay, you're hoping that they have to rush things and things don't go quite as well. But this was a really great pick. It doesn't mean that he's going to turn out to be a great player, but it's a phenomenal pick. And when you have somebody with that type of upside and you're the Bears and you're Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, There's no other way to go here. This is a home run pick. Again, it doesn't mean that he'll be a home run player, but he has the upside and potential to be that, and you just can't pass on that potential if you're the Chicago Bears in this situation. And then in the second round, yeah, they move up and get Tevin Jenkins at pick 39, a player I think a lot of people would have loved Green Bay to pick at 29. I think a lot of people expected him to be gone mid to late first round. They don't hesitate. They give up a ton of draft, not a ton, but a decent amount of draft capital, to go up and get Justin Fields in the first round. I love the fact for them that they didn't hesitate to move up again in the second round, give up more capital to go get Tevin Jenkins. It was a really, really strong move on their end. They get a high-end potential right tackle. They get a future quarterback. We'll see what happens with both of them. Both of them have a pretty decent risk reward here. Both of them could bust. It wouldn't be a shock, but I like both of these players, and I think Chicago has to be thrilled with how they came out of this draft. Not a huge fan of the Larry Brown pick, but it was at 151. Who cares? And then I thought their last four picks all have the ability to be potential late-round sleepers. Khalil Herbert, running back, Virginia Tech. Daz Newsome. They found a late-round wide receiver in Darnell Mooney last year. They may have found another one in Daz Newsome this year, a player that Daniel Jeremiah absolutely loved. Thomas Graham Jr., competitive as hell, cornerback on the outside, a little bit undersized from the University of Oregon. And then Kairos Tonga, defensive tackle, gap plugger from BYU. I thought the Chicago Bears, really did a great job, especially with the ammunition and the picks and the situation they were in. Again, to get Justin Fields and Tevin Jenkins, huge, huge draft. We'll see what happens, but this was a strong draft, in my opinion, for the NFC North. I thought Green Bay had a solid draft, maybe not spectacular, probably not unspectacular. They hit a lot of the needs, but I think the NFC North brought their A game in this draft, and I think it's going to make things challenging for Green Bay going forward. You look at a couple trends. First of all, those quarterbacks, right? Green Bay has the big Aaron Rodgers cloud over their head. Detroit decides not to address the quarterback position. Chicago gets one early in Justin Fields. Minnesota gets one in the third round in Kellen Mond. So all of those things are going to be worth monitoring and how that situation works out. Were the Lions dumb to pass on the quarterbacks? Did the Bears hit on Justin Fields? Did the Vikings hit on a lottery pick? Can the Packers bring back Aaron Rodgers? Those are all going to be interesting things that really shape the future of the NFC North. And then lastly, I think it's fair to say everyone was very, very afraid of Rashawn Gary because Christian Darrisaw, Penei Sewell, and Tevin Jenkins all selected in the first 39 picks. So clearly they were terrified of Rashawn Gary and, of course, Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, and that Packers pass rush because they all felt they need to address that offensive tackle position very early with premium selections. That does it for me today. Thanks so much for joining me on this NFC North draft breakdown edition of the podcast. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow, as I am every single day. But until next time, and until then, and as always, go Pack Go.